Hi students, I wanted to give you all a recorded lecture on coronary circulation because we didn't really talk about it in a lot of detail in class. And I also wanted to show you the coronary veins and arteries that you may be asked to identify on our lab practical on the model that we use in class. All right, so what exactly is coronary circulation and why is it important? Coronary circulation is just how the heart itself is supplied with nutrients and oxygen and how it gets rid of carbon dioxide and other wastes. So we all recognize that the heart's primary function is to act as a pump that circulates blood throughout the body in order to deliver fresh oxygen and remove metabolic wastes such as carbon dioxide. The heart itself is very metabolically demanding because it has to pump 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, regardless of whether we are awake or asleep. It has a very demanding job to do. So it has a lot of mitochondria within the cardiomyocytes, which are, of course, the powerhouses of the cell, producing ATP with the help of a supply of oxygen. So we need a way for the heart muscle cells themselves to be supplied with oxygen and to get rid of waste products. And that's what coronary circulation does. So blood flow through the coronary arteries is what delivers oxygenated blood and nutrients to the myocardium. And the branches are going to arise from the ascending aorta. So ascending aorta, one of the great vessels here, this is your ascending aorta. The coronary veins are what remove carbon dioxide and wastes from the myocardium. And the branches converge at the coronary sinus, which is not visible on this image because it's on the posterior aspect of the heart. So remember, quick review over the difference between veins and arteries because it's particularly important to have a good understanding of those two terms when we're talking about the heart. Veins are blood vessels that carry blood to the heart or back to the heart. Whereas our arteries do the opposite. They are vessels that carry blood away from the heart. And in the case of coronary circulation, you won't really see any kind of exceptions. Well, there aren't exceptions. There's exceptions to whether or not veins carry oxygenated blood versus deoxygenated blood, which is what we saw with the pulmonary veins when we talked about blood flow through the heart. But these are the definitions that you should keep in mind because there is that exception when we're talking about blood flow through the heart. So typically arteries are going to carry that freshly oxygenated blood and veins are going to carry deoxygenated blood, but just keep that in mind. For coronary circulation, veins are going to carry deoxygenated blood, whereas arteries are going to be carrying that oxygenated blood. All right, so the heart uses about 5% of the body's blood supply, which doesn't seem like a lot, but when we look at it in proportion to the weight of the heart compared to the rest of the body weight, it is actually a disproportionate amount of blood use. But that makes sense because the heart is very metabolically demanding. All right, so coronary circulation, some of the major vessels here are listed. Basically, we have our right coronary artery, left coronary artery, great cardiac vein, coronary sinus, and a few other vessels that I will be reviewing. So our coronary arteries. Now this is the actual heart model that we have in class, and I'd like you to try to identify these vessels as I'm talking about them. If you know, if you keep in mind left versus right when we're talking about the heart itself, it shouldn't be too difficult to identify these vessels just based on their descriptions. So once the aorta leaves the left ventricle, it gives off a right and left coronary artery. Left coronary artery travels through the coronary sulcus under the left auricle and divides into two branches, whereas the right coronary artery supplies the right atrium and the sinoatrial or SA node, which is the pacemaker of the heart. It continues along the coronary sulcus under the right auricle and gives off two branches. So it'd be a good idea to go ahead and pause the video here and see if you can figure out which vessels that are present on this model are the left coronary artery and the right coronary artery. All right, so if you have your idea of which is which here, I'm going to go ahead and point them out. So the left coronary artery travels through the coronary sulcus under the left auricle, divides into two branches. This is going to be your left auricle right here. Remember, that's the shoulder pad or the little flap that helps to increase the volume of the atria. So left coronary artery is going to travel under that, dividing into two branches. So right here, this is the left coronary artery. Right coronary artery supplies right atrium and the SA node. Continues along the coronary sulcus under the right auricle and gives off two branches. So right here we have part of the right auricle, part of the right atrium. So this is going to be your right coronary artery. And then see if you can also identify the major vessels here. So what this is going to be is the superior vena cava. This is going to be your aorta, and this is going to be your pulmonary trunk. Remember, the pulmonary trunk is usually a little bit anterior when you compare the base to that of the aorta. So pulmonary trunk, aorta, superior vena cava, and you can't see the inferior vena cava from this perspective. All right, so these images were taken from A&P Revealed. Anterior interventricular, circumflex branch, and left marginal branches of your left coronary artery. The anterior interventricular and the circumflex branch are illustrated on our model as well, or rather they're labeled on the model. Right coronary artery branches, we have the posterior interventricular and the right marginal. And the posterior interventricular is going to be labeled on the model. All right, so let's take another look at that model. Again, your right coronary artery is going to travel along this coronary sulcus under the right auricle. Your anterior interventricular branch of the left coronary artery is illustrated here. And then the circumflex branch of the left coronary artery is going to be right here. So what those arteries are doing is they're supplying the myocardium with freshly oxygenated blood. Now, in between arteries and veins, what do we have? You have to keep in mind that there's more to coronary circulation than just the coronary arteries and the veins, because all of the myocardial tissue has to have fresh oxygen delivered to it, and it has to get rid of metabolic wastes. So between coronary arteries and veins, you're going to find capillary beds. Capillaries are just the smaller blood vessels that actually diffuse into the tissue to perform that gas and nutrient exchange. So coronary veins are what are taking that blood that is returning from these capillary beds, returning that blood to the heart to dispose of its waste products. So the majority of coronary blood returns to the right atrium through the great cardiac vein, the posterior interventricular or middle cardiac vein, the left marginal vein, and the coronary sinus. Coronary sinus collects blood from the other coronary veins and a few smaller veins as well. So here we have our great cardiac vein, posterior interventricular vein, which is also known as the middle cardiac vein, the left marginal vein, and the coronary sinus. So looking at the posterior of our model here, coronary sinus. This is basically included in our blood flow through the heart because when we have blood returning through the inferior and superior vena cava, we also have blood returning into the right atrium via this coronary sinus. And this right here, you may know what this is. Remember, this is a posterior view of the heart. So what blood vessel would this be? This would be the inferior vena cava. So this is going to flow into the right atrium. So we have the coronary sinus, middle cardiac vein, great cardiac vein, and then the posterior interventricular branch of the right coronary artery is also going to be right here. All right, so as always, please let me know if you have any questions. I encourage you all to take a look at the models that we have in the classroom. And I also posted the key to the model that we have on Blackboard so that you can take a look at that as well.